So what we're going to be talking about today is Data Steward, I guess, toolkits, tips and tricks, a little bit of coaching, at the end of the day, I guess trying to give you guys the start of a bit of a playbook in terms of, I'd like to call it data care instead of data governance, just because it's a little bit less onerous in terms of sound. Being a data steward is about caring about the data. So, and there's a life cycle to that. So what we're going to go through today is really, how do you start to build up that playbook? And then we'll talk about some additional things at the end. So in terms of agenda, so we'll do the customary, a little bit about Altis, just so you understand who we are and what we do. We'll do a little bit of a preliminary exam just to make sure you're in the right webinar. And then we'll start to talk a little bit about why data stewardship. And these are in a day in the life of a data steward. And these are meant to be more around messaging, not so much for yourselves, because I'm sure you're here for a reason, but more for managing upwards as to, why data stewardship is important and data care overall. Then we can start to look at, I guess, well, what are the next steps? You can continue to build up the playbook on your own, or we've got some additional program that we can put together with you to help you build out your playbook. Hopefully we've got some question time at the end where people can ask some questions. So probably hold till then, I guess, in terms of not jumping in, but keep your powder dry, I guess might be the best way to put it. And then some connection details at the other end. Okay, about Altis, we do data. We only do data. It's a data and analytics consultancy. We've been doing it for 20 plus years, since 1998. We don't sell software, so we're vendor agnostic, so we're all about best practice advice around anything to do with data at the end of the day, and data stewardship obviously falls into that umbrella. Offices in Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, Canberra, Auckland, and London. And as I mentioned earlier, vendor independent. It's about 115 of us spread around the globe. So we have probably one of the higher retention rates for a consultancy group, which is something we're quite proud of, I guess, at the end of the day. So a lot of our consultants have been with us 5+ years, 10 plus, 15, 20. So yeah, we're a happy little family, I guess might be the best way to describe it. Our ethos is connecting with courage, heart, and insight, which means we like to connect with our customers. We have the courage to tell you like it is. If it's wrong or looks wrong, we'll tell you it's wrong. The heart is to treat you like one of the family when we're working together. And then insight, hopefully we can bring things to the table to help progress your organization's agenda, roadmap, whatever it might be. Okay. So let's do the preliminary exam. Ask yourself this. So do any of these statements sound familiar? And feel free to raise your hand. We're too busy for data governance. Data governance is an overhead. Some might ask, what is data governance or data literacy, data management, document management, records management, information management? There's lots of terminology out there. It's very confusing, I guess, in terms of what fits in what little box. And the simple answer is, well, different people have different definitions for those things. So if it has the word data in it, it's generally related. So it's back to just doing data. So, but you've probably heard some of these statements, maybe not from yourself, but maybe from people you work with. They're probably the same people who ask, are you sure? How is that calculated? Why are the numbers different? What data do we have? I can't find the data. Our data can't be trusted. Who's got access to the data? Is it secure? You've probably heard a lot of these questions as well. So I might just go for a show of hands. You hearing these sorts of questions or statements? Yep. Good on you. Yep. Okay. Well, if any of those messages resonate with you, and they don't all have to resonate, I believe you're probably in the right webinar. So thanks for the show of hands, people. Okay, let's get stuck into it. Why data stewardship? So the analogy I like to use, because most people have one, is a car. And so, we have data care for a reason, around your car, or you got car care, right? You service and you buy insurance for your car. You've had no breakdowns or accidents. So why do you keep doing that? Well, data care is like servicing and insurance. It minimizes your organization's exposure and risk of a data problem. Now, at the same time, you don't have to boil the ocean with this stuff, right? There are different levels of data care. And so each organization will be a little bit unique in what level they think is appropriate for their organization. And the same way with the car, you can just do CTP insurance. Maybe it's a little bit older car and you don't really worry about it too much, or it's a brand spanking new car and you need comprehensive because you want that coverage, or you just don't want to take the risk. Very similar with the fuel that you put in your car. Really equates to data quality at the end of the day. And so again, if you're talking to management, you wouldn't put dirty fuel through your car. So why would you put dirty data through your organization, right? It's a fairly simple analogy. And again, it's a question of what level do you want your data quality to be at? And it can be E10, 91, 95, or 98. That's a choice you make, right? And each organization will make their own choices. But at the end of the day, clean fuel maximizes your organization's performance. So that's really the key messages to take away from there. Some of the other key drivers that you can probably argue, as a data steward with people, the benefits, I guess, of some sort of data care program, data governance, whatever the terminology, and each organization will pick their own terminology, in fact. So a really good time to introduce the concept of data stewardship is if you've got a data and analytics project kicking off. And the main reason for that is you can do those things in parallel, because a lot of a data and analytics project is about defining metrics, KPIs, subject areas, definitions, your whole business glossary, data dictionary. Those are things you sort of want to capture along the way as part of that journey. And so that's a really good time to introduce the concept if you haven't already introduced it. Another one, and fairly popular these days, will be around compliance, whether it's ISO 27001, GDPR, government policy. There could be a number of compliance reasons as to why you should implement data stewardship or improve it. You may have already started, and then it's maybe about improving your stewardship. Lots of talk about security of information and data breaches, especially around personal identifiable information, PCI, credit cards, those sorts of things. Also important that somebody owns those, knows the business rules around them, or has defined the business rules around them, and they're being enforced, right? That's all very important parts of data stewardship. There's the organizational risk, which we sort of talked about with the cars, whether that's information loss or data breach. Each organization, again, depending on the information they're dealing with, will have different levels of risk. And in some cases, it might be, high critical sort of risks that the organization doesn't want to take. So it's important to get the data stewardship right. Yeah. And then the last one is really more about knowledge capture and sharing and education and transferring knowledge between people. When you build up a business glossary and your data definitions or data dictionary, those are all, IP. It's the organization's IP. Each organization is unique in its data. And so capturing that IP and those definitions so that everybody understands the common, a common term, those are all important things, especially when you think about onboarding new people as they come into the organization. The easiest and quickest way to get them up to speed is to point them at the business glossary or the data dictionary, where they can learn about the business, what the definitions mean, and therefore understand data quicker or sooner, or improve their data literacy. Is really, you probably heard that terminology these days as well. So it's really about data literacy is about, can you talk data at the end of the day? And the other reason behind doing this with consistent artifacts and processes is you're starting to move beyond, there's plenty of theory around data stewardship and data governance, and you can go buy, books of knowledge, but that's the problem. They're books, right? There's many pages. So the idea with our program is really about getting a bit more pragmatic and dropping a lot of the theory and getting to artifacts that are pretty easily usable, so that you can sort of advance your data stewardship quite quickly. Okay. A day in the life of a data owner or data steward, you probably quite often find you need a little bit of both of these roles. It can be the same person. It doesn't have to be different people, but they have a different focus, I guess. And so that's why we call it out as two separate hats. The data owner is more, that hat is, more concerned around the strategy for the data domain that they own, whether that might be, as an example, somebody owns the customer record. Well, they're probably pretty keen to get to a 360-degree view of customer, as an example. Once they have a 360-degree view of customer, they want to publish that as a certified data asset. We put our stamp of approval on, yes, this list of customers doesn't have duplicates in it. We've deduplicated it. It's gold level data, etc. And they want to keep an eye on that because you've got continually new customers coming in. So how do you make sure you haven't created duplicates along the way? So you got to monitor and report that. And then obviously you want the data owner to be communicating that and evangelizing, hey, don't go and create your own list of customers. I've got the gold level list of customers here. So those are sorts of the things that, the data owner hat sort of is considering on a day-to-day basis. Over on the right-hand side with the data steward, he's a little more operational and hands-on, I guess, in terms of planning data assets. And they work together, obviously, but a little more hands-on and operational in the day-to-day activities. So if we're planning a new data set, they're going to look at, well, what are the key data fields that I need to be concerned with? What do I need to get into my business glossary and my data dictionary? Because that's the knowledge capture, right, that I'm, tasked with. Once I've captured that knowledge, well, okay, I also need to make sure I've published out the data dictionary or the business glossary so that people can access it, view it. And that's that knowledge transfer that we talked about earlier. The other thing is they're going to work with the data owner around monitoring and reporting on the data quality, which will be part of that same monitor report on the data domain status on the data owner side. And then obviously they're going to come to some sort of data governance forum and data care forum, and collaborate with other data stewards, most likely, around, okay, we've got some new data coming in, who's going to own it, who's going to look after it, what do the definitions look like? And that's very much a collaborative effort, right? And then, ultimately that gets published again into the data dictionary. And so it's a continuous cycle, and that's why I referred to it at the beginning. It's a life cycle. You're continuously adding more data generally. Deleting data, yes, happens, but it's a little less common. It's more about adding or improving as a continuous life cycle. So data owner, data steward. So that starts to build into, well, what are we going to need in our playbook? Okay, so if those are the sorts of things I need on a day-to-day basis, what starts to filter in as part of, okay, these are very necessary for my playbook. So from a data and analytics perspective, this is sort of a short list of almost the mandatories, I suppose, might be the best way to describe it, that you would need in your playbook or want to have in your playbook. So some of them are artifacts. Some of them are templates that you fill out with your organization's details. Some of them end up being sort of processes or workflows. The subject area information model is probably the foundation stone, and we'll have a look at one of those in a minute just to give you an idea of what that looks like. But that's really where you lay out, I guess, your data scope and, what is it that we're going to care for, right? And you can exclude things and you can start small and build up over time. So it's, again, don't need to boil the ocean. You can take your time. These things tend to take, you don't roll them out in a day. It doesn't happen overnight, sort of thing. So be prepared to start small and build up, I think, is probably the best way to look at it. Data visualization and data set planning are also very critical to the process. And so we'll have a little bit of a look at what those templates might look like and how they might assist you. Data cataloging, we've talked a lot about business glossary and data dictionaries. So we won't look too much at that today, but just introducing, I suppose, the difference between business versus technical metadata will be something you want to consider. Again, it's back to definitions. People sometimes, are focused on technical metadata, and other people are focused on business metadata, and you need a bit of both. But you got to be prepared for that. Data issues and data requests and how to manage those. Again, a little bit of a workflow probably is the process involved there, because people will be requesting data, right? And they will come up with data issues. So how are you going to capture those, monitor them, respond to them? That all fits into that bucket there. Data profiling. As new data comes on board or whatever it might be, you need to look at, the shape of your data. What's it telling you? What are the outliers? And quite often data profiling will lead you to determine new data quality rules, right? So classic example might be you've got, expenses coming in, and you've got an expense on the credit card that looks, it's 50% higher than what would be classified as the normal average in a month. Somebody probably wants to look at that, and then they might decide, hey, whenever that sort of variation happens in an expense request, somebody needs to get notified, and that becomes your new data quality rule, as an example. So those are probably your minimum viable product in terms of a playbook at the end of the day. Okay, so let's look at some playbook examples and how you might use them. So we talked a little bit about subject area information model and many different ways to do this. I kind of like this layout because it fits on one page generally. And you sort of list out, I guess, the white boxes. It's a mixture of dimensions and facts for those people that know dimensional modeling. It's not exactly just dimensions and facts, but it's mostly dimensions and facts might be the best way to describe it. So you're going to have reference and look up sorts of data that people want to own and look after and ensure that those, oh, what do we got? We got a Q&A coming up here. Just a second. What's happening? Okay. Speaker today is me, Richard Roose, Altis Consulting. Been with the company about 5+ years in IT all my life. So yeah, I said we do data, and that's all Altis do. We're vendor agnostic. So maybe you missed the initial introduction, not sure. Anyways, following on from the subject area information model, I said the white boxes tend to align with at least key dimensions quite often. The brown boxes will align with probably key facts quite often. And as a data steward, you're probably looking for people to own each of those boxes. It could be all of a white box, or it could be down at the brown box level. But this should give you, I guess, a couple of things. Where are we at? It should, on one page, is intended to give you basically your entire data scope. Okay, so as an organization, this is what we're going to look after in terms of the data that we want to, care for or have stewardship for. And that's why I said you can start smaller. This is quite encompassing all of organization. You got finance, you got staff, customer. It's the whole organization. You can start smaller than this, but emphasis being it'll fit on one page, and these are really your level 1 and level 2 subject areas. You could obviously go lower into level 3 and 4, but from a communication to management and those sorts of things, a one-pager tends to work a little bit better. Off to the side, you'll see some maturity levels. We can also indicate and color those boxes as we go. So this becomes a little bit of a maturity assessment. So, in my mind, until it's in the business glossary or the data dictionary, you're at maturity level 2, and you can argue whether it's 1 or 2 or whatever, but until you get it somewhere where the knowledge has been captured and is accessible, that's when I would say you can move to a level 3 maturity. And so the box might turn to a blue color, right? So on this same page, you can show progress, what's in the business glossary versus what isn't, and so what's left to do, all still on the one page. It also sets up a little bit of a security framework as well, in terms of whoever owns the staff box, as an example, will control who has access to staff data. Really simple, security model as well, all on this one page still. So, and current priority, the orange ones, again, we could color these boxes to show, well, here's where we're working at the moment. So you can sort of show the roadmap as well, a little bit of a roadmap, not the full roadmap, but at least current priorities. So people can see things are being done, might not be finished, they might not be in the business glossary yet, but people are working on it. So again, it can show the priorities, and somebody might go, well, you're working on commercial too much. We really need more work on product and stock. Can you, reallocate your resource over there? Fine. Again, it's a visualization tool in its own right, around your data scope at the end of the day. Next off the list, data visualization planning template. So this is, a nice little, I guess, way, again, it's a single page on a PowerPoint deck that people can sort of see okay, I think roughly this is what the visualization might look like. Obviously, tools like Power BI and Tableau won't look like this at the other end, but that's not the intention. The intention here is to sort of grab, the key essence of what's required on the visualization. So, and the other thing is it sort of promotes multiple self-serve audiences. And what I mean by that, if you look down the right-hand side, that sort of top level, high level numbers, they're, essentially quick stories for execs at the end of the day, right? Who are looking for the high level numbers. Quite often it's actual versus budget and show me the variance, or it's the customers, average revenue per customer, and those that are on or above target sort of numbers might be what they're interested in. And again, nice little template. You can change those to whatever happen to be top of mind for the execs. Next level down is really your trends and outliers for management. So, they're looking for, well, what's my trend look like over time? Am I getting better or am I getting worse at this? What's my top and bottom 10 or 20? Take your pick. But again, that's to help you focus and prioritize on who you might need to work on harder, if it's customers, let's say, and you're doing marketing or whatever it might be. And then at the bottom level is really, you got actual detailed data. So that helps, maybe people in the customer service department, sort of almost sort customers. If we look at the revenue summary by customer, it's sorted worst first. So which customers to start on, right? Those are the sorts of things. So this is intended to serve three audiences with the same dashboard at the end of the day, which is actually quite nice. And on the far left-hand side, you'll have your dimensional drop-downs or filters. So those are the things you want to filter by, group by, sort by, sum by. And again, a number of audiences can use this one visualization to do answer a number of different questions just through filtering and grouping and those sorts of things. So it's quite a useful little one pager. Behind that one pager, you can go into the next level of detail, which is actually planning the data set that you're going to need to service that visualization. And so, you can ask these questions, who needs the questions answered and why? What's the goal and outcome of the person that's asking for this data set? What are going to be the benefits? You start to also link in here back to the subject area information model and map it to the actual boxes on the subject area information model that it applies to. So that starts to tell you, well, who's going to own this data set? There might be some additional supporting questions that need to be answered. There might be some data quality rules that need to be enforced. On the right-hand side, you start to talk about, well, what transactions need to feed in here? What metrics are we looking for? Dollars, quantities, and counts quite often feed into that area. I need the sales budget, I need the forecast, and I need the actuals. Also need the services budget, forecast, and actuals, those sorts of things. You'll want to ask questions around groups, or roll-ups, drill downs. These are those hierarchical relationships that people are quite often interested in. So classic is, well, let's look at the total for the country. Okay, I'm happy with that. Show it by state, show it by territory in terms of sales territory or whatever. Maybe by customer type. Those sorts of things start to filter into that one. Comparatives are also generally important. So I need to see this year versus last year, this month versus last month. Those sorts of questions often get asked as well. Reconciliation method is obviously quite important. So, what tells you the numbers are actually right? How do you prove the numbers are right? Those sorts of things. And then finally, security, and these are different by organization as well. What classifications an organization uses, quite often different and unique to each organization, but here's a sort of a typical, it's public, anybody can get it, confidential, it's internal, sensitive and secret, you know, different levels of security around that data. So there's some playbook examples in how you might use them. Hopefully you find that useful in terms of your data steward journey. Okay, so where to next? So we've created a little bit of a data steward coaching program, and I'll give you a little bit of the rationale and the structure behind it. So here's the sort of use case that might apply, and there's probably more than one use case, but here's sort of a typical one. You know, you don't have time for a full-blown consulting engagement on data governance, or people just don't talk data at your organization and you want to improve that. Whatever the case, most likely you know your data as a data steward or wanting to be a data steward, and you need some extra tips and tricks in the playbook. And at the end of the day, it's going to make your life easier and will give your work some much needed visibility with management. Is one reason why you want to do this better, I guess. It's also useful for funding requests. Once they have visibility, if you think about the subject area information model and they can actually see on one page what it is you want to do, where you're at in your journey, and you go, well, I need some more money to help with this, it's a little bit easier to argue when they've got visibility of it. If you just say, I want to do data governance, it's such a fuzzy term, they'll probably say, well, what is it? And you'll end up in a, you know, going around the loop a few times. So some other reasons, obviously we talked about creating that common business language around communicating, collaborating, and being able to talk data better. You want to get more value out of your data. At the end of the day, everybody talks about getting value out of data, but it's actually, it's easy to say, but it's difficult to do. But you do that through better data set planning and data visualization planning, right? Some of those artifacts that we just looked at, which also helps you plan better. The subject area information model helps you prioritize. And at the end of the day, you're laying some important data management foundation stones for the future. So for people in this situation, we've designed a fairly flexible coaching program. We've tried to take into, I guess, account where the education market is at these days. People don't have time to sit through a 1, 2, 3 day sort of training course. So we've gone with online 30-minute data bites to fit into your busy schedule. It's going to be personal one-on-one, so it's not a class of 10 or 20 where you got to fight for time with the instructor. It's one-on-one with a experienced Altis consultant, and that's really to maximize the knowledge transfer and the Q&A opportunities. Other parts of it, it's out of the box hands-on artifacts that you can pretty much take away. So if you think about the subject area information model, you should be able to take that away and start to populate it for your organization almost immediately, based on your business knowledge. It's mix and match. So it's not, everybody has to do every data bite in the program. Some people will have done some things and are more interested in other bites and vice versa. So it's mix and match. All the data bites are sort of self-contained, so you can sort of mix them up to what suits you. It's self-paced, obviously. Like I said, not every organization moves at the same speed. So, you sort of want to pace it to your data literacy, I guess, and how the organization is maturing. We're trying to keep low cost entry, obviously, to fit within existing budgets. And at the end of the day, it's COVID safe. We're going to deliver and collaborate via the web. So we've covered that off as well. Okay, what will you learn? So here's a little bit of the program synopsis. And it's really about making you a more effective data steward and champion data governance in your organization. So we've got a couple of key themes. The first one is data care / governance, and that's really about speaking and planning data. And so within that, we've got 6 data bites. Introduction, we've had a little bit of a look at the subject area information model and the data viz, data set planning. We talked about data cataloging, data layers, and conceptual data modeling. We haven't touched on today, but that's another data bite in there. The data issue and request management we did mention as well. Key theme number 2 is more around data literacy, so telling data stories. And key definitions and messages there, introduction. Data visualization principles. So this is different from a data visualization planning. There's a lot of principles around how the brain processes data. And so that's what that one's all about. It's really about how to make your data talk to people so that they understand and gain insight quicker through your data visualizations. We talked a little bit about data profiling, fits in that space as well. What does the shape of the data look like? Data quality rules, those sorts of things start to tell data stories. And then the last theme is more advanced topics. So sort of classified this as beyond data, where you got some organizations be quite interested in a broader information management framework and risk assessment, as opposed to just data governance on its own. And it fits in that broader umbrella. Others are quite interested in standing up, policies, standards, processes, and guideline frameworks. And many times that's part of an ISO 27001 initiative, quite often covering off those requirements. And then we can also talk about self-serve data personas and security frameworks, and who has access and what skills might be required for different personas. So a total of 13 data bytes that, like I said, can be mixed and matched. They're sort of self-contained. And so each person will probably have their unique requirements, and that's why we've sort of built it in this data byte fashion to make it flexible for people. Okay, so in terms of pricing and packages, we're sort of, I guess, working our way through this. And so, we've got individual data bytes. We think, some people might be just interested in one, so it's fine. Some people might want to do a bulk buy. Let's say 5 data bytes. We might cover them in terms of just picking some of those topics. Some might want 10, some might want all 13. A little bit of a discount at each level. For you people today, if we talk about individual data bytes, so they're going to come with sort of a data byte primer and a little bit of an assessment to help you gather your thoughts on the current situation, what the future might look like. We talked about the personal one-on-one, get you going, walk you through the artifacts, the playbook artifacts that might apply for a particular topic, ask as many questions as you want. Then you get the opportunity to take away the playbook artifacts, apply them to your organization, and then we do a 30-minute follow-up session to sort of review and advise on any improvements you could make to your playbook artifact and next steps to consider. So that's sort of what is contained in a data byte for each of those 13 topics. And today, or by July 30, and we will send out an email, so don't think you have to write this down, but we'll send a follow-up email just describing the offer and a little bit of an extra additional discount. If people are interested and can sign up before July 30, then we've got another 25% that we can put on the table for you guys. And I think that probably brings us to the end, or at least question time. I know we're probably bang on time. So has anybody, we've got a Q&A in here. Oh, that was the previous one. Okay, I answered that one. Anybody feel free, jump on and ask a question or unmute yourself and verbally ask, up to you. Oh, let me grab that one. No open questions at the moment. We'll give it a couple minutes. Other than that, otherwise I'll thank you for your time today, and hopefully you got some value out of that. All good by the looks of it? Okay. Well, I'll sign off. I said, thanks for your time today, and have a good rest of the week. See ya.